Sox fans, welcome back to Hot Takes and Heaters. He is Danny Miller. I am Nick Murawski, and this is the MLB centric podcast for the FutureSox world. You can jump in live on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. We stream it. We're on the FutureSox YouTube channel, so subscribe, set your notifications, smash all those like buttons, and pass it along. We do this every Tuesday. It is an evening Sox game here as the Sox are home against the Yankees in game 2 of this 3-game series. So, we might be referencing the game as the Sox are trailing the Yankees here late in the game after that lopsided win on Monday to start the series off. We're going to get to that. Whole bunch of coaching changes, lots of stuff to go over since the last time we spoke. Danny Miller, it's a new era, it feels like, buddy.
Something definitely feels different. At least last night it did. I'm waiting to pass any sort of judgment. It is still rather early in Grady Sizemore's tenure, and we'll get more into that as the show goes on. But I'm hopeful. Let's just say that. So things have been a little bit different, but hope remains, and skepticism also remains. So how's things with you, Nick?
It's good, man. Things are good. Life is, getting, hectic right now, as I think everybody is in that world with summer winding down, and there might be kids going back to schools. Schedules, man. Schedules are starting to change. I'm feeling it. But yeah, it's all good. Happy to be here talking White Sox with you. And, we've been kicking around the Pedro Grifol stuff forever, as everybody else has. That's whether you're creating White Sox content or you're just a fan. This has been that shoe that just won't drop. When is Pedro Grifol going to be gone? And we found out that answer last Thursday, a few days after our previous recording. And I want to get into all those changes tonight, specifically this Sox Yankees game with the Sox trailing here 4-0 in the 7th, and really can't buy much offensively. In Monday here, they got a double-digit win, put 12 up on New York, and it just shows you, like, on Monday we thought it was like the energy. Okay, Grady Sizemore, this is the Grady Sizemore effect. Look how he's got these guys playing, even though they lost both of those games to the Cubs in his debut. And I kind of felt like it was the Miguel Cairo effect on Monday of when Miguel Cairo first took over after TLR was not coming back or left, took a leave of absence for health reasons. The Sox caught fire. I don't know if you remember that back in 2022. And things were exciting there. They were on a run. They were on a serious run. I think it even might have started in Oakland, if I'm not mistaken, where they had some crazy late game, comeback. And so right now, I think, Tuesday, this is an anomaly to my situation, to my story here. But Monday, maybe it was short-lived, was that Cairo effect of like, okay, you're getting something out of this team that Pedro Grifol was never able to get out of. And, they might come back to earth. But tonight's game, Danny, is an outstanding example of why you invest in power hitters. Juan Soto with 3 home runs in this game. This is why you have superstars on your team, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the energy last night was palpable. It did feel like a different White Sox team. It felt like a different game. The guys look happy to be there. The dugout was lively. And I'm talking even before the score was out of control for the Yankees. It was a fun game. The first fun game to watch in a long time. They were defensively sound. They were, swinging the bat well, but they weren't piling on with a bunch of power. Sure, there were some extra base hits in there. Gavin Sheets with three doubles or 4. I knew he had 4 hits last night, but 3 of them, I think
he had
doubles.
3 doubles. Yeah.
And, guys just kind of moving runners from station to station at times, and it wasn't a big power game. And then tonight we see next to no offense, right? And it feels a little bit different, but this has been a little bit of a pitcher's duel, because if you take away what you mentioned in Juan Soto going out there and hitting 3 dingers, uh, you know, nasty Nestor out there
Yeah,
has
yeah.
been doing his thing, and Jonathan Cannon, looking solid as he has, in recent starts here. I don't want to take away from all that, but I will say that if you did take away that Juan Soto stuff, we're looking at a really tight game and a White Sox team that's still fighting to stay within this thing. So, you know, uh, the difference between the White Sox and the Yankees, like you point out, is they've got some power,
Yeah,
and the White Sox don't really have a lot.
it's the home runs. It's like, well, what's the difference between these teams? And there's a lot of differences, right? I mean, not just on the field, but within the organization and all that. But in terms of production, you got a team of the Yankees that are just stacked, man. They've got the power, of course. Sox don't. We knew that heading into the season,
We
and
definitely did.
and this type of game just reminds you of like, oh, okay, it didn't go their way on Monday, but look, they're still the Yankees. Like, they're built for the long run. And every now and then you'll get one of those games, and it didn't happen. I don't think it's happened all season where there's been a double digit win over an opponent. So it was kind of bound to happen. Goofy that it happened against the Yankees. I thought Kai Busch, boy, a magician's performance. That guy continues to walk batters. He has got some control issues, but he didn't necessarily break. And Sox offense was fun, like you said. I mean, Vaughn, who has been really different. They showed up a graphic on NBC Sports Chicago. I don't know if you saw it. His last 60 games, just the difference from his first month and a half. What he's been
His
doing, and
swing looks
yeah,
completely different. He looks like he's swinging it with confidence. He's got his leg kick back, which he was, he purposely reduced early in the season to put more bat on the ball. But when he was scuffling, his swing and his timing just looked off. And we
yes,
talked about it, a little bit here and there on this show. And the difference between stepping in the bucket and stepping into pitches, and just the way he's contacting the ball right now is absolutely mind-boggling and amazing to see the change. And I just hope that that's something that continues. Maybe he's figured it out for the long run, but he's supposed to be one of those guys that's supposed to hit for gap power and move some guys around, and unfortunately hasn't done a lot of that. And it doesn't help that he doesn't have guys in front of him a lot of the times on the base paths as well. But the other side of this is you had to think, when you bring up the Yankees and how the White Sox have put up their first double-digit win of the season in this middle of August, matchup here. You got to think that after this game was over last night on Monday night, that the Yankees had to go back into the clubhouse and go, "Hey, we just lost to the worst team in baseball and possibly the worst team in the history of baseball." And we'll see how that plays out at the end of the season, but it sure looks like it's going to go in that direction, or at least in the modern era. And
yeah, yeah.
you kind of had to figure that the Yankees were going to bounce back in some form or fashion. So,
Yeah, I would say that a loss is you'll lose to teams, and it almost seems random, right? We've kind of talked about how it could be goofy, how you can absolutely plow through a team one night and then you're lifeless the next, and it often comes down to whoever's on that mound. Now, if you've followed the White Sox for a long time, when the Sox score a ton of runs and put up a bunch of offense, you could take it to the bank that they're going to be lifeless the next night, especially if it's a night game than a day game. Now, they haven't had a lot of these laughers this season at all. I mean, we're talking like almost zero, where they have just put up a ridiculous amount of offense. So we haven't really been able to, test that the hypothesis, I guess. It's almost become a theorem now. But now we're seeing it on Monday and Tuesday. Here you go. 3 hits right now as they head into, I think, the eighth inning or whatever it is. So, um, look, was there's some energy. I've been reading some things that players are saying, Danny, about Sizemore, and more. There have been maybe 3 quotes, maybe more, about reference to him playing the game, at the major league level and wearing the uniform. And I mean, look, we can, hindsight's 2020. We can speculate, but I kind of had a feeling a while ago that players were looking at Pedro like, well, you've played baseball and you've been in the game as a coach for a long time, but you never played at the major league level,
Right.
and I think there's a respect factor with Sizemore, if anything, and that's something to be said in the next managerial search, in what direction they go.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is too is, Grady Sizemore checks in at 42 years old right now. We've gone from Rick Renteria to Tony La Russa to Pedro Grifol, who Pedro Grifol obviously doesn't fall in the same category as Ricky, and especially not TLR. But you get a guy who played the game more recently than any of the coaches or managers that the White Sox have had in quite some time. So, you get a guy out there who, even though he's like 9 or 10 years removed from the field, is still a little bit closer to action as opposed to some of these other guys that have been. And Grady Sizemore's hungry.
Yeah.
This is a guy who was out of baseball altogether and took a part-time or a minimum wage job just to get back into the
An
game.
internship, I believe, a paid
Yeah.
internship.
Yeah, paid internship that was literally minimum wage. He was making like $14 an hour a few years ago just to get himself back into baseball. And then when the White Sox picked him up for this season and made him part of his staff early in the season, there were a lot of people that speculated this might be where he ended up at. So kudos to those folks. But it gives you a little sense of, maybe that this was this younger ball club needs, especially with all the young kids coming up. And, the move with Justin Jershely along with him, who has a knowledge of a lot of these prospects that he's been working with the last few years. And I don't know, maybe there is some sort of spark. So we'll see
Yeah.
how it continues to go on. But I can't disagree with you at all. I feel like there's something to be said about a guy who was in that competitive mode of being on a baseball field at the MLB level and not all that long ago.
There were enough quotes that I read over the last week, or well, it's not even been a full week, but the last like 5 days or so, that I read into it. Like if you read between the lines, like what they're saying, what these players are saying is our previous manager. There might not have been the respect factor there because he didn't put on a major league uniform and play, at the major league level. So this was Grady Sizemore on Monday. I don't know if I'll ever manage again, so I'm going to manage like it's the World Series. I don't really care about anything else. I just care about the guys and having fun and putting them in a position where they're competing and having fun and playing good baseball. And in terms of putting guys in certain positions, Danny, you know, Pedro Grifol had a certain way he thought he was going to play Miguel Vargas. Now, Grady Sizemore says he's going to give Vargas consistency and expects to play him at third base more often than not, where Grifol was going to play him all over the place. And this is what Sizemore said about his conversation with Vargas. He told me he feels comfortable there, meaning third base, and that's probably his favorite spot. He looks great there. Small sample size, just a snippet, and maybe I'm making more out of this than I should be. But wow, that to me is interesting. Was Grifol not having those types of conversations? Was Grifol just creating his own type of narrative instead of going to the actual player? When I read that, I was like, wow, that already is different.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. Like, why does this seem like it's a new concept? And the other thing is it had been reported for a while, long before he was traded to the White Sox, that the Dodgers had every intention of moving him to third base as soon as they possibly could. After he had kind of recovered from his injury last season and got comfortable this season. They were getting really close before the trade deadline to moving him over to third base, and it didn't happen for him while in a Dodger uniform. But that's kind of the position they expected him to play over there. All of a sudden, he comes here, and Pedro's like, "Well, I'm going to move them all around."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why? What sense does that make? Are we trying to figure this guy out for some reason? Did we not have any kind of scouting reports on him when he was traded, and where his best position was? It seems awful strange to me.
Yeah, doesn't that go hand in hand with all the development conversations you and I had and, others had of don't let him touch any of the young players. Don't let him get his hands on the prospects, the pitchers, whatever. Just I don't think he knows what he's doing. Oh, well, what's it going to matter if we fire Pedro or not? It's that concept alone of like I don't know if he knows how to handle new talent, especially talent from a different system. So Grady Sizemore, started the season. I think it was in the White Sox yearbook for 2024, where it just said MLB coach. Do you remember that? Like that was his
Yeah.
label. It was just MLB coach. We didn't really know what he was going to be doing, but he was in the system. He was in the organization, and he's definitely caught a lot of people's attention. And here he is now. As your interim manager. And he's under contract to 2025, Danny. Now, Chris Getz, we're kind of going backwards here in the whole, situation, all the dominoes that fell. But Chris Getz talks specifically about the managerial search involving someone that's in a uniform. Like that's what we're looking at. And my co-host, Pat Hester for Good Guys Talk Back, brought up a pretty good point that by Getz saying that, probably was able to eliminate the whole Ozzy and AJ situation that was kind of ramping up. But Grady Sizemore in a uniform this year, doing whatever he was doing before he got into the interim. Before we talk anymore, I mean, do you think he's got I guess it depends on what happens this next month and change, but do you think he really has a serious chance of being in that conversation for 2025 manager?
You know what? I don't know. If you were to read some of the articles posted just since last night, and if you were to, talk to some of the bloggers and other podcasters and in the world of White Sox podcasts and streams, they would say yes. I mean, there's been reports that he is gaining momentum within the organization and gaining more of a a move towards at least getting an interview, right? Obviously, they felt comfortable enough to put him in this position now. When you had, Charlie Montoya as a guy who had, major league experience as a manager, and you let him go along with Pedro. Um, I don't really know, but I think eliminating him, eliminating Ozzy, eliminating AJ, eliminating anybody at this point is probably wrong to begin with. If you're talking about you're going to do a comprehensive search and you're going to do your due diligence to find the right candidate to take this team, through its next steps, you shouldn't be eliminating anybody at this point. I think Chris Getz coming out and saying, we're going to look outside the organization is something more for the fans, at least in my mind, because he knows there's a huge number of fans out there that think the entire organization is busted and has been for a long time. So why do we need to even consider anybody that's in uniform or within the organization right now? I think that's just to make us feel better. But at the same time, if you're not doing your due diligence, i.e. Jerry Reinsdorf hiring Chris Getz for a quick turnaround, then you're doing the entire team and fan base a disservice.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. I think maybe Getz thinks we want to hear that as fans, that they're going to go outside of the organization. When maybe it is in the organization. Maybe the next manager that's going to, continue to develop and keep pushing this group forward, and any other additions that will come through the farm system or whatever they actually do in free agency or via trade. Maybe that manager is in the system. Maybe they're around the organization. Maybe they're not necessarily in a uniform. And I'm okay with that if you do an exhaustive search. If you really, if you, and you're willing to listen to differing ideas, and if you're going to be serious with yourself and bring in all kinds of managers, and the thing that's going to get goofy is it's the Chicago White Sox. They're going to lose close to 120 games this year. We all know their track record with spending money. The future is pretty bleak. So even if they identify the next great manager, whether it's Skip Schumacher from Miami or Gibbons, I've heard his name floated around. The Mets bench coach used to manage in Toronto. Whoever it is,
Louis Strauber
they've got
Jr.
to
picked a good time to get his first hit of the evening.
Yeah, Robert Jr. With an RBI, giving the Sox some life here late in the game. That person that you identify in your search has to want to come to the Chicago White Sox. Because if they're that interesting of a candidate, wouldn't a more, I guess, comprehensive organization, a more serious organization, already have that candidate on the radar if they're looking for a manager? And they might even be able to pay more money. So there are a lot of things that have to, like, it takes multiple things to work on this, just like in a trade or in a free agency or something. Like, oh, I want this guy or I want that guy. Well, it has to be both ways. You know what I mean? And what I struggle with, and I brought it up on Sunday night on Good Guys, and I've talked about it on social media, and I know it rubs people the wrong way a little bit, but how can we collectively, as a fan base, Danny, kind of admit, and have been for a while, that nothing is truly going to change while Jerry's in charge? Okay. But then all of a sudden, hear Getz say we're going to, we'll look outside of the organization, and all of a sudden think the Sox are going to get serious about a managerial decision for 2025. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't have faith that they're going to absolutely identify this or have the resources to set this person up for success. So I can't say that I'm full of hope when it comes to that.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Going back to last year, I used to say I kind of had a thing where I would tell Ian, basically my feeling is I'm like Missouri. I'm the show me state right now. I won't trust anything that any of them say until you show me something. And since I started that and since I've adopted that kind of mentality, I haven't seen much. Yet we're told over and over again in the last 2 years about the changes being made throughout the entire organization, not just the ball, the ball players in the field and the clubhouse and the coaches on the field. We've been whispered, it's been bandied about that there have been numbers added to minor league training staff, and there's been numbers added to spring training staff, and there's been changes made in scouting, and there's been changes made in just about every department, but we're not seeing the fruits of any of those labors right now. It doesn't feel like anything has changed. Um, you know, Barfield, I will give him credit. It does feel like the pitching staff, at least starting wise, has been, better. But is that really him, or is that, the prowess of Mike Shirley and his drafting? Because a lot of those guys that we're talking about looking like studs are still in the minor league system. We have gotten some pretty, decent starts out of guys we didn't expect at the major league level, but the bullpen's atrocious. But outside of that, it just doesn't feel like much has changed. And I don't know that if we're talking about these changes and then we're also going to go out and do this comprehensive managerial search, we're supposed to just feel like the entire organization is headed in the right direction, and that these guys are actually capable of hiring the right guy, whether it's with or within or without of the organization. Excuse me. I'm just tripping over my words a lot here tonight, like I
That's
was
right.
last week. So
There's
I
a lot of
apologize, guys.
emotions. There's a lot of emotions.
You know, here's like Trey says in the chat. I was actually just going to bring that up. Like, if we've got a Bannister and a Barfield, and we don't have any, hitting type coordinator of that sort, are they going to do something like that in this off season? Are they going to go out and find the guy who's the guru, the bat whisperer, to come in and kind of take over and overhaul the entire, hitting group? Because we're seeing a lot of great pitching, but we're still seeing a really big lack of offense.
And that's been a traditional problem, right? Is the offense with the Sox. Like, I feel like the Sox have been able to develop pitching and pitching. They're not going to pay for it, but we seem to have, a collection of arms every certain amount of years, that we've got in our system, and they're sticking with Cats. Boy, he is loved. He is loved by the right people, and he is a survivor. He is an absolute survivor. I don't get it personally. I really don't, but he's still here. I was glad that they got rid of Tosar. It's not just a Pedro Grifol problem. I mean, he was a major part of it, but get rid of Montoya, fine. Get rid of Rodriguez. Get rid of Tosar. All the people that Pedro brought in. It's like, this was on you, man.
Well,
get all
Mike
these guys
Tosar,
out.
was he some kind of guru in Kansas City? Were they
Probably not? He was
lighting
just
up the?
He was
none
a
of these guys were hitting
relationship.
340.
He was probably a relationship of like, hey, we have a relationship. Will you? I'd rather work with somebody I know. You interested in coming over here to Chicago? He wasn't probably the best of the best. Not that I'm saying the best of the best will come to Chicago, but shoot for the moon. Stop with the nepotism, the buddy stuff. That I only want to deal with people that I'm comfortable. Get uncomfortable. Find people that make you uncomfortable, that push you to be better.
Yeah, and as Trey points out in the chat, after Mike Tosar left, the Royals offense magically got better without him. Kind of the point I was trying to make. And then, you talk about finding the best of the best. Me, personally, as a longtime Sox fan, I don't know if we'll ever see the best of the best. And I had this conversation on Twitter earlier, and I'll kind of give you my take on it is, I don't necessarily need to see the best of the best, but I do want to see competency. I am tired of incompetent coaches that maybe they do know what they're doing, but can't seem to get through to guys. There's some sort of mental block between coach and player. Maybe there's the communication just isn't there. I don't know what it is, but I need to see something that translates from coach to play on field. And we just have not seen that in a long time. This has been a typically anemic offensive team for so many years, even those years where the White Sox were 93 win team. It's just, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, they won a bunch of games, but they had great pitching. They had offensive outbreaks, but they were not consistently a major offensive team. And I think that's kind of what bit them in the playoffs, is the offense completely dried up.
Oh, they were just outmanaged too. They just look like, from a strategic standpoint, Houston was just like, we are going to outmanage you. We're going to outsmart you. We're going to out prepare. It looked, it was clear on that. Aside from that one magical night where Lurie Garcia.
I was going to say Lurie is your highlight.
Yeah.
Come on. He was also the low light with that awful play.
Perhaps, Danny, perhaps the White Sox organization might need to stop investing in a certain type of offensive player. Like they've had a type, I feel like. They've brought in between Makata and Aloy and Robert, I think there's a serious chance he's going to be gone in the offseason. I don't feel as confident about him than I do Crochet.
And I also believe there's a serious chance he figures it out when he leaves here.
Robert? Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So, like it just, I don't know if it's the player or if it's the coaches that are trying to develop the player, but there's obviously a disconnect, and if you are going to your best of the best, it's, I guess I've thought of, well, what do we do well? And like, let's just be really, really good at that. And maybe you don't know what you do well, but I feel like if you understand your limitations or your boundaries and you're like, this is what I could work with, we're going to be the best at this. I feel like Cleveland has done that really well over the years. They know where they're at and they just get the most out of that. And year after year, they're at the top of the AL Central. So that would be great if we got a Bannister type guy in the offensive world. Can the Sox identify that person? Can they bring him to the South Side? And what would that person say about the type of hitters we have in the organization? Would they say, well, I can tell you already, these guys aren't going to buy into my system, or this is probably not going to work. This is the type of model I'm looking for you to go after to bring in. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really know either. But I guess the biggest takeaway from all of this is something definitely needs to change. I don't know if it's coach, I don't know if it's type of player. Um, we've heard at the beginning of this season that they were going for guys who were more defensively sound, who fit the White Sox FAST acronym, which actually, blew up in their face. And they were supposed to be, helping their pitchers out and just being all around better on the field because we knew we didn't have a bunch of hitters, right? And then I, I'm I'm just waiting to hear that we're gonna change up our approach to finding bats in the lineup, and hopefully that doesn't blow up on our face because it's just not something. Again, I have that skepticism in me that I'm just not going to believe anything they say until I see it. And real quick, just a quick shout out to Trey and Ian signing up and becoming a member with us tonight. Trey, for your
Yeah.
tip, we really we
Yeah.
appreciate all our tippers. You guys are awesome.
Yeah. Great chat so far tonight. Sox
It's rolling. I can't keep up with it.
Sox in the ninth, trailing by 3 to the Yankees. They got another one on Wednesday night, off day on Thursday, and then off to Houston, getting the hell out of town for the DNC that's making its way into Chicago. So I don't blame the Sox. Whoever wrote up that schedule, obviously that was purposeful. But who would you say, I guess, right now in this system is your threat? Is your offensive threat that you're either looking forward to in the near future that we could see maybe in 2025, or you're looking at right now and saying, I could see how this could bud into something, it just the right development, the right chances. Because we know where the arms are coming from. We've talked heavily on the pitching, but within the Sox system, I think we need to start looking at a collection of names because it's kind of it's weak, it's thin, I would imagine.
It is. We're looking at one of these guys right now. I think could be a possible threat right here in this game, and that's Brooks Baldwin.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope that folks aren't too quick to judge him now. They're looking at his batting average, hovering between 200 and 220. But he's shown some, little bit of power. There's a lot of folks like you just bring up now. Colson's struggling, but again, Colson is younger than most of the guys that he's playing against in AAA. He moved up through the system a couple different levels in less than a year. Again, also great stuff coming from Jamie Wallace in the chat there. Edgar Caro is a guy that I'd be on the lookout for. Tim Oko definitely has the power. He's got a good power stroke, but I'd like to see him be a little more selective on some of his pitches. His K rate is still pretty high. He's over 30%. He's probably in the 35 to 36% range. It's not awesome, but he is hitting well in AAA. Oh, and as I say that, Ian pops up
Yeah, Ian's got your
327
number, 327 in
in
AAA.
AAA. I'd like to see his OBP a little bit higher, and be a little bit more selective on pitches. But man, I'll take 327 if his OBP is 327 and his
Mhm.
batting average is 327 and he's hitting you 30 dingers more a year. Uh, yeah, that's a guy that you're going to keep an eye on. So there's a handful of bats within the system. I do believe some of these younger guys that they traded for just recently. We got that Albertus, a couple other guys. So some of the guys that they drafted, going to be a couple of years away. And before I really kind of get into any of those guys, I want to see what they do in the minors. But there are definitely some intriguing names. Let's just, hope that they put the right people in place to develop these guys, because that's been an issue for the Sox.
Yeah, Corey Lee with a home run on Monday night. I'm not as man. I watch more than I think people understand. How can you do that? How can you watch this much White Sox baseball? I'm not watching as many games as I have in previous years. It's on the background. But
How
I
can
feel
you?
like, exactly. It's just like I can't. Like my eyes are bleeding. I will get caught up some other way, but to watch this live night after night, painful, of course. But Cordy Lee seems to, I don't know. I catch him when he's hitting bombs. Is that, am I off on that, or he's got some pop? I think this is a guy that could he be somebody that we look at for the future?
I mean, I think the plan is for Edgar Caro to be your guy behind a dish every day in the future. How far away we are from that is kind of unclear at the moment, but I think come next spring, he's definitely going to be in the competition for that starting catcher spot. But Corey Lee, I was on him last year when everybody was kind of down on him. He's a ball player. He's always been a ball player. He's a guy who can probably, if in the right situation, figure some things out. Again, people are looking at his batting average and going, "Ugh, this guy isn't the greatest." But catchers typically these days, how many catchers out there are hitting 280?
Yeah,
It's a very slim bunch. You're the days of the Pudges and the Piazzas are pretty much gone. Catchers become more of a defensive position, and
Joe Mauer.
if you do have a catcher that can hit, that's you found a unicorn, and Corey Lee could be that guy. I just want to see that continue to develop, and I don't think that it's outside the realm of possibility if that does
I
happen.
like him. I don't
Yeah, I
know, and I
really
and
do.
I keep sometimes when I attach myself to a player, I say kind of in my mind like, prove me wrong, like make me not like you, and nothing has really happened yet where I've kind of fallen off. Like, well, he scuffles, sure, but I like his defense. I like his pop time is great, of course, and there's offense. He's got a bat with him, which we haven't had a lot of that in the White Sox organization lately.
We have not. And real quick, I want to point out that Ian has corrected me since moving to AAA. Tim Elko has his time in AAA. Tim Elko only has a 21% strikeout rate, which I'm totally okay with. You're hitting 320, 330, and 380 plus OBP and a 21% strikeout rate. Sounds like an absolute stud. I'm hoping that Tim can continue that kind of play and eventually, do the same thing on the south side. But yeah, I mean, Corey Lee is a guy that if he figures it out consistently, could absolutely be a threat in a good lineup. And especially if he's got some protection around him as well, too. If the Sox, get a couple other guys in the right places and you get a guy who can, there's just not a lot of protection in this lineup. Let's be honest. When
Oh,
you've
sure,
got,
it's thin. Yeah.
right, when you have to force a pitcher to throw to some of these guys, that could change a lot.
This game just got really interesting. If you're listening to this or watching this, days after the recording. My apologies, but we got nobody out here in the bottom of the ninth. Gavin Sheets has continued his hitting ways from Monday. You got Vaughn and Sheets on here. Sox still trail by 3. Sox aren't productive with men in scoring position. When there's ducks on the pond, it's usually awful. But I don't know, Danny. I mean, if the Sox, again, come back here and do something, I think we have to really start talking about this Miguel Cairo effect of a team just all of a sudden playing with a different edge. A Grady Sizemore boys don't quit type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. The White Sox have not had that typical 8th inning implosion since Grady has taken over. The bullpen's actually pitched better. I don't know why. I don't know if that's just a fluke. And the offense hasn't given up. The White Sox were down to the Cubs over the weekend, and they lost both of those games. But when you look at the 7-6 loss on Saturday, the Cubs were down like 6-1 at one point, I think it was, or 6-2, something like that. And they came back. They fought their way back into the game, and they lost by a run.
Yeah.
So I mean, there seems to be a bit more fight in these guys. They absolutely, whether or not they're getting the W's every night, they do look like a different team. There's a different feel. So I really hope there is.
He's got a bit of an energy too. Barking. Maybe it's just the younger. Hey, maybe he was able to build kind of some friendships, some healthy relationships, because players didn't really look at him like a boss or like a manager, and Pedro just was such a stick in the mud, man. He was, I just felt like he had a personality complex and he had no idea what he was doing from day one. It was just all lip service.
I'm giggling at the chat here. I apologize. I'm not laughing at you. I'm sorry to step on you, but I'm going to ask you, this coffee is flowing through me. Can you throw a sticker up for me? And I'm going to take about 30 seconds here.
Okay.
I'm just going to let the chat know, like, Danny's got a tinkle.
Okay.
So if you're listening.
I'm gonna give you a quote here while you do what you need to do. This was Chris Getz. Chris Getz talking about really the managerial search. Getz wants somebody currently wearing a uniform. I mean, does that matter in the long run? But it's important to bring in a new voice, a fresh voice, perhaps that's been exposed to areas of this game that we don't currently have in our organization. I'm very curious to learn more about some of these individuals, and then we'll get it to the finish line and name the next manager. I feel like it's a fairly basic structure. I'm very open-minded. I look forward to getting it started. There's always some hoops you have to work through because you're at the mercy of other clubs, and you want to respect other clubs that are looking forward to finish strongly, or make the playoffs, whatever it is gets said. We don't want to rush into this. I anticipate naming a new manager after the conclusion of the season. Look, again, that's all great. I mean, he's said all of the right things. A new voice, a fresh voice. I feel like we heard this from Hahn when he began his search to find Pedro Grifol. Ultimately, way back when, I think we were so starved as a fan base that we just wanted something different. And different at that point, different felt like, okay, well, this is going to be good. Anything besides Tony La Russa is going to be better. And Grifol sold us, he sold us on playing baseball the right way. We're going to be holding people accountable. He brought in people from outside of the organization, all that kind of stuff. And honestly, this sounds like Hahn all over again to me. Aside from, I guess, specifically talking about, a manager in a uniform, I don't believe Hahn said that specifically. Guillen was talked to. last managerial search. So we're told. I don't know if it was much of an interview. He'll say that it was probably not much of anything, as they already kind of determined, who the manager was going to be. I think it was more of out of a courtesy, but I wonder if they've got people in their mind right now, which I'm sure they do, and that's going to limit themselves. And they almost want to make the decision before anybody else can get to them. And maybe there isn't going to be a real exhaustive search. But to me, at the end of the day, it comes down to whoever you identify as the next great baseball mind for this White Sox organization. Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the tools in place that are going to set this manager up for success? Are you going to put the right people around him? And what kind of rope are you giving? Is this a 1-year deal? I don't think anybody's going to take that, but Sizemore would, because Sizemore just wants to manage. He'd just be lucky enough to manage. Where an experienced manager that's in a uniform right now is going to say, you're going to give me a 2-year, 3-year deal? No. I want a serious commitment here. Are the Sox going to be able to make that? Can they afford that? Obviously, Pedro was on the cheap because he had zero experience. So it'll be telling to me. It really will. Again, I'm so skeptical on this whole thing, but look, yes, does the team feel a little different right now? And I think it's that Cairo effect.
Yeah, well, and you're talking about bringing in a manager on a much longer contract, or just showing that you're serious about it. How do you expect to hire a competent manager, knowing that it might be a few years before this team is truly competitive again, and this guy's only under contract for 2, maybe 3 years? You're just getting into that place where they're feeling like they're in a competitive window, and you're not really guaranteed to be a part of that. So if you're the guy who's the rebuild bridge, your record's probably as a manager isn't going to be great. How do you explain that in your next interview? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't believe that's a losing situation for a good manager.
those are really good points. I mean, a veteran manager would want some security. They'd want to know that, hey, I'm going to put the work in, I'm going to develop, but I also, I want you to invest in me as I'm going to invest in this organization. I mean, that was the whole Ricky Renteria thing. I thought that they were going to stick with him past 2020. I really did. I didn't think he was just a developmental guy. I just thought he was the right guy for that group,
He
and
sure did get a lot out of those guys, didn't he?
he sure did. And I don't think the organization gave him a lot in return in terms of, spending money on premium talent when it was ready. Sox, I don't know. They're going to test Judge's arm. No, they're not with Vaughn at third. 2 outs, bases loaded. I saw a shallow, and I'm like, well, I don't know. We'll see. But Vaughn, not the man you send to that situation at all. So bases loaded, 2 outs here, bottom of the 9th, as we're keeping our eye on this game.
Yeah, it's I mean, they're threatening. It was looking good when we had second and third with nobody out. Then we were bases loaded, and they haven't been able to capitalize.
This could be a
as
really
of
cool
yet.
moment. Trey
But
brought it
Brooks
up here.
Baldwin,
This could be the Brooks moment. This really could be something big, and I think that would get some excitement here heading into this last stretch of August
oof.
and moving forward, of like, who's this Brooks guy? In terms of who should I be paying attention to, if you're still paying attention to White Sox baseball.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it, but this could be the moment. Although that first swing and that first slider was not.
No.
It was ill advised. Oh, and he is just getting eaten up by that
Yeah.
same pitch on back to back
Yeah.
pitches here.
Well, it's probably a little bit of I got a chance to be a hero here. There's some excitement, maybe doing a little too much. And you're eager, man. You're really eager in this situation.
You are indeed. You are indeed. So here we go. Pitch number 3 coming up. We're going to take a pause on the show here, and He
How are
fouls
we
off
this,
the same
Danny?
slider.
How are we this excited about what, a 93 loss team or whatever they are right now? Like
Yeah, we
we're
got to get to
tense. We're like,
30 here. We got to get to 30. I mean, tonight would be a great night to get to 30, would it not? And our Tuesday record would be absolutely sparkling at this point.
yeah, we have had a nice Tuesday record. If you've been with us, which there's so many great ones that
There's no
have.
strikes to take anymore, David. Oh, and I
Get
do
out, get out of
believe get out
play.
of play.
Thank
Get out of
you.
play. Come on. There we go. All right,
Folks
cool.
are going to be listening to this, after Tuesday night. How are these knuckleheads this into a 29 win team? How how are they hanging on every pitch right now? It is crazy when things get kind of exciting. How that old like Sox fandom, you just kind of slip right back into that. I'm excited for this. It would be one hell of a walk off right here.
It would. And I mean, it's something new. It's like getting that new toy on Christmas, when Pedro walks away and the feel is a little bit
Oh
differently.
boy.
Yeah,
Sorry.
well,
That was all that for a check
it looked
swing
like
strike.
it looked like he checked it up to me, but
I think
after
no, he
getting
went. He went. Eager,
he did
young,
go. He did.
young
Okay.
buck. He'll learn from it. Well, it was
Well,
somewhat exciting there at the
he
end.
really got fooled on that slider,
Yeah.
down a bunch. And even if he did check it up, I don't think they were going to give him that one because that pitch was like kryptonite for him and that at bat. But I mean, the fact that the Sox are actually making it interesting against one of the best teams in the AL right now, it's that's exciting baseball. We've talked about this in the past. Like, what would you rather see? Would you rather see the Sox get blown out, or would you see them fight and lose by one? And a lot of people are like, a loss is a loss. But when this team is as bad as it is at 29 wins, these these games they're more interesting when you see them fighting all the way to that last pitch.
Well, and guys that'll play into 2025 and they can be successful. That I get into that. How Cannon pitches and hopefully Thorpe can bounce back. We'll see. But with Kai Bush, hey, you got to go through some of this stuff right now, and it's a fine time to do it. You have a couple of erratic starts. Hopefully that's not a trend. But guy, this team has got 90 plus losses. Do it now. Try to
Right.
figure yourself out right now. It's a long audition, and guys that'll play a role in 2025, I'm watching, and when they can do well, when they can spark, that gets me interested, for what the Sox have foundationally.
Yeah, I agree. I have a question for you,
Yeah.
and this came up a few weeks ago. I know it was talked about somewhere where it
Why do
might
I
have been
love
Jeff.
Ozzie Guillen so much, and why do I want him to
No,
be
no, no,
it?
no. We'll say maybe we'll do that one
let's
towards
Yeah, let's
after this
not
one.
even.
But
No, let's not
no,
even.
okay,
Okay.
all right. No, I was just gonna say is like, so it was brought up that Getz said it in an interview about we'll probably see these young arms come into the bullpen at some point, and it's kind of it's a Bannister uh move. You know what I mean? It's typical of Brian Bannister to, even if they are starting pitchers, kind of give them an opportunity in the bullpen before giving them the starting pitching role. Do you think we'll see some of those guys in the bullpen soon? Like, I'm just kind of curious as to what they're waiting for.
Yeah.
I feel like there are some DFAable arms out there and a handful of guys that, like you said, Kai Bush, some of these other guys, go out there, let's get it done. Let's see what you can do now in a 90 plus loss season, right?
Yeah,
So, what are your
I hope
thoughts on that?
so. I hope so, Danny. I really do. To me, it makes. I don't get why not. You can have the argument of why waste him? Why waste him on this club and this situation? But the bad man's gone, and some of his best friends. It's a different vibe. It's a different energy, and like there's not a lot of pressure to perform in this situation. You'll put it on yourself naturally, and you want to. I think the pressure is to audition for future opportunities to be considered in 2025. It's not pressure of wins losses, of course, this year. It's pressure of this is what I have to go into the off season. And in speaking of off season, I think you'd want to have something to think about going into, those winter months. Okay, this is what I did in September when I got chances and opportunities. And you could look at some film and other eyes, whether it be Bannister or Katz or whomever in the organization, can look at that and say, this was at a major league, level game. This is what we saw from you. This is what you're working on. This is your homework assignment. So I find benefit in that, even on this type of team. So I really hope so.
Okay. Well, having said that, and we've brought up a lot of names tonight. When it comes time for roster expansion, just give me one name of anybody
Oh,
you would like to see come
you're
up, whether it's
you.
pitcher or position player, it doesn't really matter. But who do you want to see at the end of the year to, kind of finish out the last month or so?
Gosh, that's a great question. I mean, you and Ian and James would have a better handle on like who's who's knocking on the door. What's a realistic? I mean, I could give you some names here, okay, that I'm excited about, and you tell me which one of those is the most realistic. Okay,
Okay.
I'm just gonna give you names that like these are guys in the future here that I'm really looking forward to see, and we've named some of them: Adams, Montgomery, Caro. Somebody like Schultz is way, way down the road, but I'm really intrigued in him. I mean, we'll just start there with some of those names that I just gave you.
Okay. I think so. When it comes to I don't want to start the clock on pretty much all of those guys that you just brought up. I think Caro is a guy that, like I said, will be probably in competition for a job with the team next year, but I don't want to see him, up now. There's no reason to start his clock. Um, Especially with Corey Lee, like you said, he's playing really well. He looks
He
the
is,
part.
yeah.
He's a great defensive catcher. He's got one of the best, if not the best, pop times. And then of course, they brought up uh, Charlie to be his backup. So I think we're pretty solid there, and I don't think Carroll would get enough playing time. Thank you, Peyton,
Thank you,
for
Peyton.
becoming a member.
Yeah.
Um, I just, if you're gonna bring these guys up, I would want to see them get playing time. So as far as the position players go, I think Colson Montgomery would probably be a mistake for that same reason.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think the three guys they have outside of Vaughn in the infield right now are the three that I want to see play every single game in and game out until the season's over. Uh my thing is I kind of want to see like some of these other pitchers. Like somebody brought up Jake Eater. I believe it might
Yeah.
have actually been
Yeah.
Trey. If you're gonna bring up a pitcher, I think that might be the guy to throw in the bullpen. McGarity might guy to bring to see
Danny, and I
in
can't
the
stop
bullpen.
thinking about Eater these days because Jake Berger is just on a tear right now. Jake Berger
Well,
is just in fuego.
recently, he has
That's
not
true.
had the greatest of seasons, but in the last 3 weeks or so, he's been absolutely fire on a bad team. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. On a Skip
he,
Schumacher coached managed team. How about that?
yeah, who, when you talk about going outside the organization,
Mm-hmm.
it's really the only name that kind of rings a bell. It just, when those reports surfaced that he was leading candidate, we all went, no kidding, huh?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, as far as pitchers go, though, I think it would be one of those guys. Position players is a little more difficult for me because I just don't see a need to start the clock on some of these guys that we know are probably going to be big parts of the future. Uh, and I don't think it's going to help. I'd like to see maybe an outfielder more than I would an infielder at this particular point. The infield, maybe you get Ramos back because he's, his clock has already been started. He's been part of this team. He can kind of play a few different positions in the infield. Um, maybe be a utility guy, give somebody a break every now and again. But yeah, it's really difficult to say. I mean, if you bring Ramos up and you bring a pitcher up, that pretty much ends it, right? We get 2 or 3. I think would they go up to 28 now or
I thought they
from
did.
26? So
I could be wrong on that. Yeah, I get your reasons on that. That makes a lot of sense. You've got to figure out, like, can we do it? Is it necessary? At the end of the day, like, is this really something we need to figure out if they're going to be in the cards for 2025? And if there's not the spot and the situation doesn't, reveal itself, then I guess you're not going to force it.
yeah, and you brought up Mason Adams. Man, I can't wait to see that kid pitch.
Yeah.
At the major league level. I absolutely cannot wait. I think there's a very good chance that there's going to be little difference between, say, him and Noah Schultz and some of the other guys that are Hagen Smith, who they just drafted, who's already in the top 100, and is like number 3 in the organization or number 4 in the organization right now, and I think he's number 3 actually. But I think there's going to be very little to differentiate between those guys. I think he has the ability to be a top 2 rotation piece, and I can't wait to see it. But I just don't think that this season is the time for him.
We kind of winding down here, so we'll end on a maybe a nostalgic, that positive, but also kind of sad when you think about it. Yankees in town, of course. Just yesterday, August 12th, was the 3-year anniversary of the Field of Dreams game.
Yeah,
and I cannot believe it's only been 3 years. How much has happened in 3 years?
And where Tim Anderson is.
Yeah, where Tim Anderson is. I mean, at the end of this season, when you look back at where are the 2021 White Sox, where'd they go? Where are they? It's going to be a fascinating, depressing, but still really interesting of what's left, but 3 years, Danny. I mean, I know
are the last
exactly.
Comiskey guys working on that? Where's the 2021 White Sox?
I've talked to them. I've said that is a documentary that has to be made. What happened, and then that might have to be for maybe years down the road. But I know they got their hands full with the Chicago Stadium project, which is going to be very, very cool, and everything they're doing with the Bulls and the Blackhawks and all that great stuff. But I remember where I was sitting. I remember my reaction. I remember the highs and lows of that game. And 3 years, it just feels like a dozen. It's just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Again, giggling at the chat. Ian, I think TA's chopping up brisket sandwiches at the Buc-ee's in Kodak, Tennessee.
Hey,
chopping up briskets and selling, kayaks at a gas station. Can't beat
free
it.
lunch. The world needs ditch diggers. Yeah, I mean, on and everything that's happened. It's just when I saw that, and it's like one of those things that I think I'll always, every year at that time, I'll think about that game and say, wow, that was such a marker. That was such a, just in that rebuild era, that was a very, that was a moment for sure.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that where we sit now is where we ended up. Things were looking good, and the funny thing is here we are. We're watching the White Sox play the Yankees again on the same dates 3 years later, and the feel of this game and last night's game was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But it wasn't Field of Dreams game, walk-off home run after being up and then being down and
just
Tim
the
Anderson
whole concept of the game and everything. And in that season, coming out of COVID, so to speak. And so, yeah.
Completely different, man.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye on this team, this next week. Where's the energy at? What are we seeing different? What's Sizemore saying? What are the players saying? And some of these guys like a Baldwin, how are they playing? How are they handling themselves with really eyes on 2025?
I want everybody to keep their eye on the prize for the future.
Yeah.
This has got to be. These are the learning moments, right? Is the 2024 season close out, and you're going to be bottom dwellers no matter how many games you win the rest of the way out, which we probably still don't expect them to win very many, no matter who's at the helm. The turnover as far as roster turn has not been dramatic. So, I just want everybody to keep their eye on the future, and I want them to develop as best they possibly can. Go out there and keep doing your thing. And, Brooks Baldwin, Ramos, Vargas, all of these guys, and, any of the young guys coming up, Fraser Ellard in the bullpen.
Yeah.
You guys got to keep your eye on the prize and keep your heads up, because this isn't on you.
Yeah. We will try to keep our eyes on the prize next week, next Tuesday, right back here. We do this live. The chat has been always great, and it was once again great tonight. Thank you so much for jumping in and chopping it up with us. Pass this along. There's so much happening, really on the farm. Lots of content with FutureSox. We are the MLB centric program, however, and but some of those young guys are going to be coming up, and they'll be at 35th and Shields before we know it. So this has been a treat. Hopefully you feel a little better about things, Danny. I know this was helpful for me.
Absolutely, always, every week in and week out. Therapy. Therapy gives me the room that I need to grow and continue to grow. So I appreciate you.
Awesome. Folks, subscribe to the FutureSox YouTube channel. That means a ton. He is Danny Miller at Danny Miller FS. I am Nick Murawski at Nick_GGTB. Until next time, go Sox.